Welcome everyone. This is Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden and I will be your mindset coach today. And today we're going to be talking about coaching and relationships, especially when it comes to marriage, because marriage is one of those things until death do us part, for better or for worse. But today those vows are going to be more different, right? They're not going to be, you have the right to remain silent. And now people who are getting handcuffed, I'm going to effing sue you and I'm going to do this. And now it's till death do us part, and it's going to be until I don't feel like doing my part anymore. Now, just because we are at that crossroad in marriage where marriage is not a long-term thing anymore, yet it's supposed to be until death do us part, it's going to be until you're not doing your part, or I can find someone who's going to do the part of marriage the way that I want them to. The way I say it is very combative, right? It's like, ooh, marriage is this, you're going to get a divorce. And I don't believe that. If you have two individuals that are willing to make it work, that's what it's going to be. And in my marriage, for example, it's like, I'm only planning on getting married once. Because if I walk into the marriage just thinking, well, if this doesn't work out, just get it back up. That's in the back of my head now. Well, if I find myself single, I'm going to enjoy being single. Because marriage has wonderful blessings. But then it has some setbacks, right? Especially if you're going to be traditional, you're going to have that monogamous type of marriage. You're not going to be polyamorous. And for some men, that might be a good thing. For some men, it might be a bad thing. And then the idea of what you put onto your partner, right? For example, it could be sex. For example, it could be cooking or cleaning or providing, paying the bills, right? So when is the strain of our responsibilities taken and saying, whoa, I don't find fulfillment in this. And in marriage, you should be somewhat fulfilled. Of course, there's going to be sacrifice, but just because there's some sacrifice, it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice your whole entire life because you picked the wrong person. So today we're going to be talking with a relationship coach who's going to be helping us understand the aspect of marriage, some of the hiccups that can happen, and then ways around it. So if you're in a marriage or thinking about getting married at some point in your life, this episode's for you. Welcome, Jeanell, Greene, Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming on. Today, we're going to be talking about the work you do. And the work you do might be broad in the beginning, but I know you're going to get a chance to tell us about it. You are a life and marriage coach, and you help people in all aspects of life grow and be a better person. Now, I know life coaching is something that has become a popular trend, and relationships have been on the rise where people are like, okay, I'm struggling in my relationship. They need someone there in their corner. And I know the conversation today that we're going to be having is going to help people how to get their life back on track. But in your own words, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help?
I'm a leader. I'm a speaker. I am a wife of 17 years. I believe that I've been put on this earth to bring love and healing to the world. Really what I do is I help people save their families and their marriages. Many of us were not taught how to have great relationships. Our parents were never taught how to have great relationships. And so, I'm on a mission to transform what it means to be married. Because I think as things change, even in the pandemic, I think there was an awakening that kind of happened, right? I don't know if you noticed that, but people had been tolerating and avoiding certain aspects of their life. And all of a sudden, we're forced to be at home and to deal with whatever was not working at home. And so, although divorce rates have risen since COVID, I think there's also this opportunity for us to really reflect for ourselves. Who are we and what kind of relationship do we want? Also, that we think that we deserve. Because oftentimes we say we want something, but deep down inside, do we actually believe that we can have happiness, that we can have love? And I think so many of us feel unworthy, right? We all have our I'm not good enough conversation. And oftentimes, if we don't address that, we start to sabotage all the amazing things that are in our life because we feel unworthy. And then on the flip side, and this is kind of where my work comes in, is that when we have issues in life, when we're not happy, we automatically go to looking outside of us for the problem and for the solution. And what I do with my couples is I really get them to look within and say, okay, well, I got that you have this problem with your spouse or your partner, but let's look inwards first. Because if you can't love yourself and forgive yourself and accept yourself, how can you love, forgive, and accept the people around you when you haven't even learned that distinction for yourself?
Yeah, like relationships have become more of a, I guess you could say, seasonal thing where it's like I'm in season right now, or you might hear about this is the hot take, a situationship, right? So I'm in a situation with someone where they're in it for a moment. But when we look at relationships, like especially the old school and traditional relationships, they're long term, they're long lasting, right? You have more
Yeah.
high school sweethearts in the past than you do today. Now it's
Yeah.
kind of like I'm with someone for a summer, a year, and
Mhm.
then you're on to the next person. Why do you
Mhm.
think that transition from being something that was long term to being so now short term and abrupt?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I've actually never been asked that question, and I'm super excited to answer this question. I think it's because, and you might agree or not, but I believe we're kind of in this society where we always are looking for the next best thing, right? It's like, okay, I just want a car. Okay, no, now I want a new car. Okay, now I want a $100,000 car. Same thing with a house. It's like, okay, I just want a house. No, 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 I want a real house. No, no, I want a detached house. No, I want a mansion. And so we're always never happy. And we're always thinking about, is there something out there that's better? Even for us, and going back to the I'm not good enough conversation that we have with ourselves, we're always constantly comparing ourselves to other people. And so no matter how hard we work at being the best that we can, it feels like we're always failing because we're always comparing our worst day to someone's best day. And especially with social media, right? Where everybody shows up happy and look at me in my nice car and look how much money I'm making, when that's such a very, very small, peek into someone's life, right? When we see these, like Tony Robbins, for example, we look at him and go, wow, look at him. Like, how amazing. I could never be that. But we sometimes forget that even Tony started in a very, very modest and very humble beginnings, but we don't think about that. And so we're constantly unhappy and trying to think and thinking that happiness is getting that new job or getting that new car or buying that new house, when really it's about us feeling worthy and happy with who we are and what we have.
Yeah. Here in coaching a session, I'm going to say this as a disclaimer so we can have a real good conversation. There is no arguments. We are always going to be respectful. We're always going to respect other people's opinions and beliefs when it comes to just asking questions. So, like, if I have a different opinion or belief, it's not going to be like, no, you're wrong, Jeanell. I don't believe that.
Yeah, I
I
know.
I believe that two people should be able to have a cordial and a adult conversation because that is what we need when it comes to relationships. The reason I say that is because sometimes we just get this notion of what a relationship is, and the moment is something different than what we believe, automatic argument. Oh, I don't believe that. And I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about in
Oh,
general.
yeah.
People are going to be listening to this podcast, and we're probably going to be saying some things that are going to be like, boom, right? Shocker, shocker, shocker.
Trigger.
Yeah, and they're going to be like, I'm going to send Jeanell email right now. Start typing crazy, right? Listen to what we have to say. And then, of course, look at your life and maybe it reflects, maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
So I want you to understand that to all the audience members because relationships have become very complex. They're
Yeah.
not as clean cut as they used to be, where you
Yeah.
find someone you love, you stay with them for the rest of your life. You might have a hiccup along the way, but you get back together and then you guys live a happily ever after life, right? That's that Disney fairy tale where Hollywood has showed you what a relationship is, like, for example, The Notebook or something like that, right? I want a relationship like this. Okay, do you? Sometimes people are like, well, I want something adventurous, right? Because something gets old and things like that. Well, how do you keep things fresh? How do you keep things
Yeah.
new? How do you keep things the way that you want? And there's
Yeah.
a notion, right? Sometimes people grow together, sometimes people grow apart. And we're
Yeah.
going to be talking about that. Before we talk about that aspect, I wanted to get your definition of what is a traditional relationship versus a modern relationship. And then from there, we can start to dissect the different two. So if someone's having a traditional value type mindset and they're like, I want a traditional relationship, they know how to get it. And if they want a modern relationship, what is that? How do I get that? So, in
Mhm.
your own words, what is a traditional relationship? And then what is a modern relationship?
For me, to me, I don't make that distinction because at the end of the day, it's whatever works for the two of you. Do I call my relationship modern or traditional? I don't know. I try not to label things as good, bad, or traditional, not. I just think it's really a creation that two people have. And so, as a marriage coach, I'm, this whole polyamory and open marriages is a new thing for me. I was like, oh, I didn't realize this was as popular as it's now becoming very evident to me. So I guess in that realm, yeah, I think I have a pretty traditional marriage. I've also been divorced as well. And so, is that traditional? No, not really. I just think that my husband and I have one of the benefits that my husband and I have is that we had two parents. We both had parents that were very loving and affectionate and respectful. And if I were to sum it up in one word, it would be teamwork. And so we had really good role models to really show us that no matter what happens, you're on the same side. You're not working against each other. And I find myself reminding my clients that if we want peace in the world, we can't have it if we can't even have peace in our family. And at the end of the day, really, of course, I do this work because it makes a difference for couples. But at the end of the day, what I'm really about is healing our future generations and equipping our children and our future children and their children with the basic necessities of like how to relate to other people and more importantly, how to relate to ourselves. Because, I have clients who call me because their 10-year-old daughter, after watching them fight, has said, I never want to get married. And so now we're creating this fearful generation of people who would rather just focus on work, making money, instead of really experiencing what life is all about, which is love and service and gratitude, not all the materialistic stuff. And, my background is sales, and I used to make six figures before I became a coach. But then, as I sort of turned around, when I turned about 40, I realized that all the cool novelties that this money has generated for me is great, but that's not what happiness is, at least not for me. And so I ended and completed that phase of my life where I said, you know what? I proved to myself that I'm successful, that I can make the money I want. And now I'm at this next phase of my life. I've really dedicated myself to being the space that so few people have in their relationship. When I was going through my divorce, nobody knew that this was happening, that we were in breakdown. To the public eye, we were great. And so it's a privilege for me to be with these people who are feeling shame and guilt, abandoned, they're lonely. And I love being that space where they can cry, especially men. I think a lot of men have been taught not to cry, not to show weakness, not to be vulnerable. And when we can share that moment together, it's a pretty magical moment for me and an honor, because I am clear that this is something that is a miracle, really, to allow them to just open up to someone that they just met and to feel heard. Because a lot of couples, we don't know how to listen, right? And so they're like, wow, to just feel heard, to feel validated, to say, hey, how I feel is not only okay, but it's awesome and it's great. And it's like the first step to really unpacking why the pain is there. And so, yeah, I really love the work that I do, and it makes a difference. And I don't know at the end of my life how many people I'm going to impact. The number I gave myself was 10 million. I said, I want to impact 10 million lives. That's what I'm committed to. I don't actually know if I'm ever going to hit that number, and it's okay, but that's what I'm committed to. That is the energy and the version of myself that I know needs to show up in order to make the difference that I want to make in my life.
There is no wrong relationship, I think. I believe that you can have any relationship you want. So if you want to have a modern relationship, that's fine. You want to have a traditional relationship, that's fine. There's not like, all right, if you have a modern relationship, you're doing things wrong. I don't believe that. I believe you should have whatever relationship you envision for yourself and what's going to bring you to the ideal relationship that you have in your mind or that you have set for yourself. Because you might say, I want to travel the world alone, but yet you could be married. Maybe you are with someone who doesn't like traveling. So that's like a perfect mix. All right, I'll stay home, take care of the dogs or whatever I have to do, the kids. If you want to travel, go travel, right? That's a good team right there. It's an effective team. But yet, if you go on a trip with someone, you need to go with your partner. Otherwise, you're alone and people don't like being lonely. We talked about that already a little bit. So a relationship is going to be, again, unique to what your envisioning for a relationship. However, Hollywood has told us something different. Hollywood has told us what type of relationship do we have to have? What type of family dynamic do we have to have? What's allowed, what's not allowed, right? What are the red flags? What are the good things to look for? So now we're just operating under a notion that's not our own. So, oh, I need to have long hair. I need to have long nails. I need to go to the gym so I get a big butt. Whatever it is for ladies. For guys, I have to go get a six-pack abs. I have to wear some things in my shoes so I can be a little bit taller so I can hit that 6 feet mark, right? So we look at the aspects of what is the other people's preferences and then trying to attain those preferences when really you can be 5 feet or less than 5 feet and you can still find someone that you love and admire. And it doesn't matter about height, it doesn't matter about looks or bank count. It's about the person, right? Looking at the person. Now I want to talk to you about values because you were in a really unique situation where you were married and then you decided to separate from your former husband. Now you are together with someone you really love and truly admire. I wanted to talk to you about the difference in the values between the relationships. And did you even look at the relationship values in the beginning when you were maybe younger with the first marriage? And then how you look at your relationship now is it more value orientated?
Hindsight is 2020, right? When I look back, I think I was 24 when I met my husband, my first husband, and my dad had just passed away. And being Filipino, there is this expectation, right, about kids and getting married. And so as soon as you hit like 18, it's like, when are you gonna have kids? When are you gonna get married? So there was this sort of time, the women listening to this know what I'm talking about. There's this like this time, right? The sands of time where we're like, okay, we need to get pregnant, I need to do this by this date. And when I really think about it, I think I said yes because I was afraid that no one else would ask me. I was afraid of being alone for the rest of my life. And on paper, it was great. Good job, check. Handsome, check, had all his teeth, the things that I thought were important in a marriage he had. So I was like, okay, how bad can this be? I think I had some really specific expectations based on what I saw from my parents about what a marriage should look like. And so, yeah, I think at that point, when I look back, what I see there is that I had expectations that this person clearly could not fulfill. And there was so much frustration in trying to have someone be something that they just innately were not. He tried, but it was like pulling teeth, But right before we got separated, I did this course. It's called Landmark. And I really got clear about, wow, I have not taken responsibility for my part in this. Because of course, when you're frustrated, you start saying things you shouldn't be saying and being mean and, just withholding love, punishing that person in some sort of fashion, right? Shutting down emotionally, numbing out, just all those things that we do to kind of push people away. And so when that epiphany came to me, I sat him down and I said, listen, I am so sorry. I have been judging you. I have been making you wrong. I've had such high expectations of you. And I realized that, you know what? You're great the way you are. There's nothing wrong with you. It just doesn't work for me. Rather than where I was coming from was like, you're wrong, you're a jerk, you're selfish, you're this, and really was like, wow, I made all of that up. And the impact of that, right, is that we are where we are. And so it was great because it was such a powerful conversation for me to just be like, you are whole and complete and perfect just the way you are, and so am I. And this is just not going to work. To take it another step further, being Catholic and going through this process, it was the moment in my life where I finally said, I am going to stop people pleasing. I'm going to stop trying to look good for people. And I'm just going to do what makes me happy. Because there was this point where I was like, okay, I could stay. I could, kind of maybe get my own bedroom or, I was trying to think of other things I could do rather than getting divorced. But I was like, that has no integrity. And I deserve better. I deserve to have what it is that I want. The kind of relationship that I've been dreaming of my whole life is out there. I know it is. And I just have to love myself enough to be willing to stand for that. 3 months later, I met my husband. It was in the most random way. My husband actually lived 4,000 kilometers away from me when we met, and everything just kind of fell into place. And here we are, 17 years later, and we are more in love now than we were in our first year together. And it's because we have been such a team going through things like COVID, being sick, financial ups and downs, me going from making tons of money to like now starting my own business. We've just been supporting each other throughout the whole thing. And so people think, oh yeah, being married after a while, things just kind of die. Well, I say, well, it doesn't have to if you're willing to do the work and if you let go of the thought that that's how marriage should be. Where I'm saying, no, marriage does not have to be that way. We still kiss each other 20 times a day, tell each other we love each other 20 times a day. We're playful, we laugh, we still do the things that we did 17 years ago. But it's because we're both committed to being a team. Our communication is fantastic. And we really look at ourselves as, a friendship first. And that is, I think a lot of couples don't have that, whether they got pregnant really quickly after getting married or, the whole going from dating to becoming parents happened really, really, really fast. And they didn't have time to develop that. So their life or their marriage is kind of like a house of cards. Anything passes by, everything falls apart. And so that's the work I do is I really help them to create those really strong foundations so that when they do hit those bumps in the road, that they don't look at each other and start pointing the finger. It's like, no, 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 I got your back. I got you. We're going to do this together.
You have a great mindset when it comes to just looking at you came from a situation that wasn't ideal, but then you said, let me focus on what is ideal and to look at the things and to say, okay, I want something different, right? Sometimes that different can be a different person, right? Sometimes it could be the person making some changes, right? But you notice that he was just stuck in his ways. And some people are stuck in their ways. And I always
Yeah.
say a man can change. He will change for the right woman, but sometimes especially at the time in his life, will he change, right? And most men are not going to change until like 28, early
Yeah.
30s, right? It's just
Yeah.
the mindset of men is different than the mindset of women, especially
Yeah.
at, in their early 20s or mid 20s.
Yeah.
So,
I think also too, I thought
mhm.
I thought I wanted someone like me. Like, okay, I want
Oh,
someone who's outgoing and like kind of an alpha energy. Oh my
mhm.
gosh, we were like butting heads like crazy. My husband now is like polar opposite. He is quiet and shy and he's sweet and he's very soft-hearted and has a very strong feminine energy, very intuitive. So when I introduced my husband, Michael, to the rest of my family, and I had been dating a certain kind of type of man up
Mhm.
until that point. My family's like, I don't get it. I was like, yeah, I get it. I get that you don't get it because I've never dated someone like this because I thought I knew what I wanted. And then when I met my husband, I was like, no, this is what I want.
Yeah, this is a great way to look at it too, because if you have two alpha energies, just two energies that are very strong and no one's willing to budge, it's always going to be that argument. This is like, all right. And then at the end of the day, it's kind of like, well, I give up, right? Because it's like, I'm not budging, you're not budging. It's always going to be a battle. It's never a ceasefire, it's always a battle.
Yes.
And most people don't want to fight their whole life. Most people want to have peace. They want to find some balance and they want to be happy. Like to your point, they want to be happy. They want to live a life that is fulfilled, whether that be with the perfect person or with someone who they think is ideal, right? And that's what happens initially, right? When people are finding their first partners, this person looks great on paper. They check all the marks, right? They're tall, they're handsome, they have all their teeth, they are somewhat kind or whatever. So we can go down the list of things that, like I'm seeing that other people have. But just because what other people have doesn't mean you have to have it. Because if I look at my parents' relationship, it's the total opposite of what you have. My dad was in and out of the picture, he was doing his own thing. And my mom could have easily said, I'm done with this, right? This is too much work. This is crazy. But again, my mom is Catholic too. She has traditional roots from her mother to her grandmother to her great grandparents. All of that right there was instilled into her. Now we
Mm,
have broken households, right? So we have just parents co-parenting or single parent households.
yeah.
So there's not really that foundation that we can see anymore. Similar to
Yeah.
how you were able to look at your relationship with your parents, you saw love and affection and care and teamwork, but you weren't
Yeah.
getting that in your first marriage. But then in your second
Yeah.
marriage, like, that's what you were looking for. And
Yeah.
it just took a different type of person. So,
Yeah.
so I wanted to talk to you about when someone is really looking at marriage now, what are going to be the appropriate things to look at today rather than just our ideals?
Right. I think, first of all, we need to get really clear about what we want. Because, so for example, I have this client who they were about to get divorced. And I said, what are your non negotiables? Because I think that's a conversation that we don't really have. Because especially when we're in love, we don't want to rock the boat, right? So we just focus on all the positive stuff. But I think what's been missing in a lot of these relationships and why they don't work out is you have to be willing to have those hard conversations. And so one of these things that this couple was dealing with is he said, one of my non-negotiables is that we need to have sex at least 4 times a week. And for her, she was like, what? Or what was another thing of his? She's not allowed to drink. He's allowed to drink, but she's not allowed to drink. So one of his non-negotiables is you are not allowed to drink. So I said to him, I said, if this was such a big deal to you and a deal breaker, like you would actually consider divorcing her because of this, why didn't you say this in the beginning before you got married? Why was this conversation not had? Same thing, again, going back to sex, I meet couples who one is like extremely high, love language is physical touch. And the other person is like, you know what? I could go years without sex and I'm okay with that. And I'm like, how is this going to work? And how did you guys even get together? And did you even talk about this? So I think it's about talking about expectations. Here's what I think marriage looks like. So for my ex-husband, to him, a wife is someone who cooks, who cleans, who has babies, and he just goes out and does the work and comes home and brings home the bacon. And then he plops his butt on the couch for the rest of the night. Maybe goes into his workshop. I'm like, no, I want that. Like my husband, he's the dinner guy. That's his thing. He loves to clean and he's very particular about how he cleans. I love that. My ex couldn't even like lift a finger to take up the garbage, And so those were things for me that were values that I at the time didn't know I had. But values for me, I got really clear. It's like, oh, my love language is service. Okay, I need someone who's willing to show love in an service oriented capacity. My ex was very gifts. I'm like, I don't care about gifts. I don't care about the thing that you bought me when I haven't seen you in 4 days because you've been locked up in your workshop building whatever it is that you're building and you haven't even come out to give me a kiss or have dinner with me and I'm all alone. And so I think one of the downfalls that I see men make more than anything is that they think that the doing, well, like I take care of the kids, I bring home the bacon, I swept the floor, isn't that enough? And I say, well, what she says is she wants connection. So how are you fulfilling that? And it's again going back to teaching people habits and behaviors that they haven't been taught because whether it's their parents or a lot of people don't have siblings. So they're not used to thinking about others. They're kind of just used to just thinking about themselves. Right. And so I think it's just a behavior change. And it's a tough one unless you have an accountability partner to remind you and to catch you when you're going back to the old ways of being. And so, yeah, you're right. Any marriage can work and it just has to be two people who love each other enough to be willing to, first of all, accept each other just the way they are and just the way they're not and not try to fix them and change them because someone else, but also just being so committed to being with this person and being their best friend and being their best and they're being their cheerleader that these bumps on the road don't feel like the be all end all. They're just like, hey, you know what? I know there's going to be bumps, but I got your back. You got mine. We're going to be okay. And that's really the experience I have with my husband. And he always just keeps reminding me that he's there for me, that he supports me, that he loves me. He doesn't even care what I do. He's like, you just make yourself happy. That's all I want you to. I just want you to be happy. And so we've just created this very appreciative and respectful relationship that is effortless, if I'm really honest about it. But it's effortless because we put in the effort every day. We water that plant 3 times a day even. And we're really honest about our own insecurities. We love being vulnerable with each other and sharing those parts of us that we're afraid to admit. And it's such a beautiful thing when you can connect on that level where you're like, I see myself in you and you see yourself in me, or, what I'm trying to say. But it's just like, we're the same.
When you are with the person you're supposed to be with, it's not supposed to be work. Now, relationships are work. they require constant maintenance, right? Let's call it
Yes.
that. If you have a
Yes.
house, you're not just going to buy your dream house, bought my dream house, cool,
Yeah.
right? You're never going to paint it. You're never going to fix a squeaky
Yeah.
door. You're never
Yeah.
going to change the floors. If you get a house, most likely there's going to be some things you do, modifications you make. That is the responsibility of home ownership. And when
Yeah.
you're in a relationship, there's many things that you have to always be providing maintenance,
Yes.
connection, communication, right? Learning your other person's love language, understanding what type of dreams that they want to aspire to have, and then being there to support them and then to hold them accountable, respecting, loving, loyal. There's just so many aspects that come that we have to always make sure that we are upholding. Sometimes stress can get in, sometimes our life can impede, and sometimes we just become so singular and we focus on ourselves that we forget about our other person. That happens more often than not, where it's just someone is so bogged down with their sense of duty, especially men, because they have that sense of I'm the protector and the provider. If they go with that traditional route, let's say they get laid off, now they lost that ability to be a provider. So now they're having a conflict of identity. It's like, okay, who am I? Right. Then they have to try to reclaim that. Or maybe they learned that maybe this is not what I want it to be. So again, it just depends on the person. What I always tell people is that you can always do a pivot even in a relationship. So if you're going down a path and you're realizing it's not working, well, what are the aspects that are not working, right? Maybe, you coming home and plopping yourself on the sofa and then going to your workshop might make you happy, but it's making your partner miserable. So ask yourself, do you really need this, right? So kind of like how we talked about, or you talked about your non-negotiables. Do you need to go into your workshop? Is there something else that you can do? Instead of having that workshop time, maybe you have a family movie night. And you can schedule that. It's things that you can do to create that connection and not take away hobbies. I think sometimes people think, oh, I have to give away all my hobbies. I have to stop going fishing. I have to stop going out with the boys, or I have to stop going out with the girls, or I have to stop drinking. That's the other person's insecurities and the idea of, well, I have bad habits because of you. So they're blaming the other individual for the actions that they're doing or the inactions that they're not taking. So it's just there's a lot to relationships, especially when we look at it from the lens of a modern relationship. And then in the modern relationship, it's going to be focused on what do I need in order for me to be good. So then the relationship is good versus the traditional is I have a role. Let me fulfill my role the best way I possibly can. It doesn't matter which one you have. Just understand this is the one you have. So if you have a traditional, just understand you're in a traditional. If you have a modern, just understand you're in a modern. I even have a thing when I work with people, because I do relationship coaching too, where I have traditional with modern flares and modern with traditional flares is what I call it, because you can have a modern relationship but still want to be monogamous, still want to do other things. So it just depends on which one is superior. People who have a modern relationship typically have a traditional with modern flares. So that might be you, where you have that traditional relationship where it's just like monogamous. I'm with this one person, I'm their teammate, and I'm there to support them. But then at the same time, I'm going to, do what I need to do too at sometimes. But again, relationships should be effortless, not saying that every relationship is without work. When we are in those relationships now, right? So we finally do our due diligence. We go through the checklist of the relationships, things we want, the non-negotiables. We're like, okay, I'm ready to settle down. What can stop a person from maybe one day waking up? Maybe they're in their 40s now. They're like, it feels like something's missing. Life is missing something. Because sometimes men, they get into that situation where they're in a marriage, maybe got married young, and the marriage is doing well, right? They think they're doing good. But then all of a sudden, their partner is like, well, I just feel like I'm missing out on something. I feel like there's something else out there for me. How can a man combat that?
That's a really great question. So the first thing I would say, if there's any guys out here like listening to this conversation, is when a woman comes up with a complaint, like what you just said, right? You don't spend enough time with me. You're always out with the boys. You're always in the workshop. What's right there is like, oh, she's not happy. I'm not doing enough. I suck. All of those. I am a failure. And what I would remind people is that under every complaint is always a desire. But yet we focus on the complaint rather than desire. And so what we're doing is we're resisting, we're justifying, we're defending rather than going, okay, so what's she saying? Oh, she's saying she wants more time with me. Okay, how can I create more time for her? So I think it's just being able to listen in a loving way and not, I think a lot of us, because of our own insecurities, when someone says they're unhappy with us, we automatically like take that in as though it's our thing. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's the other person. Like maybe they don't love themselves. They feel insecure and they're looking out in the world and going, okay, what could possibly be the reason why I feel this way? And the automatic, right? Because you're right there. Oh, it must be my marriage. And so I think first of all, guys, is to first of all just get the communication without trying to fix her or trying to dig too much into like with the whys, but really just get it. It's like, yeah, I got it. You're feeling that there's something missing. Yeah, I hear you. Because women just want to feel heard. And I think very few men know what it means to listen, to understand, and to empathize. Because, even for myself, we go into fixing. Okay, how can I fix this? How can I make her feel better? When sometimes all that needs to happen is just to get the communication and to say, I got that you feel this way. And listen, I'm committed to work with you so that we can both be happy in this relationship. So what do you think we should do? Right? It's a really like proactive, a teamwork kind of thing rather than, oh, so I'm not doing this enough. Oh, and what about, and how about you? You don't do this thing. And it becomes this like battle. And so someone has had the courage to admit to their partner, I'm not happy, and to have that thrown back in your face, that's why people shut down. That's why people stop trusting each other. That's why we stop listening. And that's why extramarital relationships happen, is because it's like, well, my partner doesn't get me. My partner doesn't listen. My partner doesn't respect me. Oh, but hey, I've got this coworker who just knows how to listen to me and I feel safe. And so I'm going to start to create this closeness. And now with social media, where we can create a relationship with anyone in the world by just an app, I've been for myself and my business, I've been meeting a lot more people that are dealing with infidelity through social media. It's not the traditional affair, which is like meet someone, have sex, or whatever it is. It's now like, oh, my husband's cheating on me. It's like, oh, what happened? Well, I found him texting someone. It's like, okay. And was it sexual? Well, no, but it was in secret. So now there's all this gray area around infidelity. But again, I think a lot of it has to do with our own insecurities and the ability to just trust our partner. Because I have guy friends. I talk to guys on text all the time. But because me and my husband have such a great relationship and I'm open with him about who I'm talking to, I even invite him to come meet the people I'm talking to. It's not a problem because I'm secure in myself and I'm secure in my relationship. But if there's already a smell of distrust and secrecy and lying, well, that is just the perfect storm for that relationship to start to deteriorate.
Do you believe any marriage or every marriage is savable? Or some marriages are going to have to be, I guess, you're going to have to hit the reset button?
Yes, and yes. I think every marriage can be saved. And yes, I think in order to save the marriage that has been, especially around infidelity, you have to hit the reset button. Because if you don't, because to me, a reset is whatever's happened has happened. Let's let that be. Now we're going to focus on moving forward. That is really my messaging to my clients. I'm like, listen, what happened, happened. We can't change that. And you have a choice. You can either live there in the past, feel crappy, or you can move forward and really create the relationship you've dreamed and just get that, you know what, we're human, we make mistakes, but we're willing to forgive. And I think forgiveness is one of those things that very few people actually understand what it is. And so we have a really hard time forgiving ourselves and we have a really hard time forgiving others, especially when it comes to our partner.
And what if there was a non-negotiable somewhere there? Let's say distrust, right? We had some infidelity, right? And that could be one of our non-negotiables. If you go out and you are with someone else, I can't see you as the person I love anymore. There's no reset there, right?
I get this question a lot. People say, can I save my marriage? I say, absolutely. If you are committed to that, because that's all it is. With humility, I can say I can save any marriage. But if either person is a no, it doesn't matter what I do or what the other person does. If the other person is not willing, it's like playing on a team. You can't play by yourself. You need someone to pass to. And if that person's unwilling to catch the ball, then what's the point? Quick story, when I was 9, my dad cheated on my mom with my mom's best friend who lived in our basement. And he got her pregnant and he left. Almost 4 years. I was 9, my sister was 6, and my brother was 3. We were very young. The universe would have it that 3 years later, my dad would get ill and he was put on a transplant list. He came back to my mom. This whole time, the 3, 4 years, my mom was at church. I'm no joke, every day. just praying. Because I remember being a kid and just being at church, kind of like looking around, like, "Hey, mom, when are you going to be done?" Right? But that's a visual that I have, is my mom on her knees just praying. And so then my dad came back and he said, "Listen, I'm sick and I need you to take care of me. Will you take me back?" And my mom said, "Yes." And she said, "I have two conditions though. Number one, you never go back. If you're here, you're here. Second rule, we never talk about this ever again. We forgive, we move on." She held her word. And there would be times when my dad would be filled with guilt and he'd start to, "I'm so sorry what I did." My mom's like, "No, I don't want to talk about it. We agreed." And she kept her word. And what's so beautiful about it is not only was he a better father, he was a better husband, he was going to church every day, which he wasn't doing before. And when my dad passed away, my half brother, who I had never met, showed up. And now I have this extraordinary relationship with this man who I get to share about our father to, who he didn't know my dad. And so I get to relive who he was and his memory in conversation with him. And he's a beautiful man. Again, I think that is such an amazing example that when you are committed, no matter what anyone else says or thinks or the rules, if you are so committed to love and to family and being with this person, then you can create anything you want. It's just a choice, right?
Yeah, being in a relationship is a choice, right? We get to make the choice for better or for worse, sickness and health, because a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, I don't really like what's happening," and they can run away. They can say, "You know what? I don't want to show up. I don't want to be the person I'm supposed to be," right? But if we can remain diligent in what we want, our values, our systems, and then staying true to who we are, who we're becoming, looking at our partner and seeing who they are, who they're becoming, moving together, in unison rather than just separately all the time, can really lead a marriage in the right direction. And the conversation that you and I had today is just the tippy top of marital problems or relationship problems. And people are going to be looking for some help. There's just so many questions that people have or situations that people are in today, especially today, where it's the first time for them. And they might have no experience, no knowledge, and they're trying to find answers. In our last minutes, can you please share some final words and then please tell the audience where they can find you?
Yes. So two things I want to say that we didn't talk about, but I think is so important in any relationship, not just marriage. Number one, appreciation. We so much focus on what's missing, what's wrong. And so therefore, where focus goes, energy flows, right? But for me, I really focus on appreciation of my husband. Everything, even when he's not doing anything and he's just there, I just, "You know what? You're awesome. You are just an incredible human being." And he'll say, "Why? What did I do?" Like, "Nothing. You just are amazing." And the second thing I would say is responsibility. Be responsible for yourself, your actions, your behavior. Oftentimes I go, "Well, I acted and said that really mean thing because they did this." But that does not negate the fact that you were out of integrity, who you say you are and what you're committed to. And so when you can be responsible, not from a place of fault or blame, but really just responsible for like, "Oh, I just had this thought. Oh, I had a really nasty thought about you and I'm just going to clean that up with you," is so powerful. And I think too many people focus on the resisting of their own crap. We all have crap. We all have BS. And to pretend that we're perfect, I think is detrimental to creating vulnerability and connection inside of any relationship. So I would say that those are the two things I would want to remind people of. And where they can find me at www.jeanellgreene.com or at saveourmarriage.ca.
And I'll definitely put those links in the description box below so people can easily find you, reach out to you, and then begin to break down their relationships. Because I said it earlier, every relationship is going to have a unique, I guess you could say, situation. And some might be a first time for you. I'm sure not, because you have dealt with the gambit of so many issues, so many problems. Even if we have different opinions, different views on what marriage should be, having a person have a background in that, helping people understand the different aspects of it, is going to be key to saving your marriage and then building the best relationship possible. All right, everyone, I'd like to thank you for watching the episode with Jeanell Greene and myself. As you can see, she's going to be someone who's helping people in their relationships get back on track and then to save their marriage. Because yes, you can save any marriage as long as both individuals want the marriage to be saved. Because if you had someone already checked out and they're like, I'm checked out and I don't really want to do anything with this person, regardless of the kids, regardless of values, it's just like, I'm already checked out. That person is going to go do their thing. Similar to how some people, you might say, don't touch the stove, don't touch the stove, it's hot. You tell that to a kid and then the kid is like, well, I'm going to touch the stove anyway. I'm gonna put my hand in the fire because I need to learn from experience. Some people need to learn from experience where it's not so much a person be happy, it's that I make me happy. So we have to do the work ourselves. We have to do the action of putting our hand in the fire, getting burned, saying, out, that's not a good thing. So some people learn that way. Sometimes if a person just has it in their mind saying this marriage is not working and that's how they see it, and they're like, I'm not going to be happy ever in the marriage, and they're going to leave. Very modern way of thinking. And there's nothing wrong with thinking in a modern way. And I said it in the episode, I'm going to say it outside of episode 2. If you want to have a modern relationship, understand you are having a modern relationship. If you want a traditional relationship, have a traditional relationship. Because when sometimes you bring on a relationship coach and you're talking about relationships and about sexes and dating, there's always the aspect of what type of relationship do you want? And most people are going to say traditional, right? I want a traditional type relationship. Yet today, traditional relationships are very hard to come by, where you have two people working as a unit, right? So one of them is going to be a protector and a provider. It doesn't matter about sex, but traditional man is going to do it. And then someone is going to take care of the house, the family, raise the kids. Doesn't matter who does it, right? Someone has to do it. Now, you can pivot both roles too. So you can say, well, if you want to be the provider at some points and you want to be the caregiver and the cleaner and things like that, that's perfectly fine, right? You can interchange those. It's just that sometimes people, they get so strict on their responsibilities, they create their identity. And that identity can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. Yet today, it is more often a bad thing, where we get so caught on our roles where we don't remain flexible. And in a relationship, you have to be flexible. Because if you're not flexible, if you're not able to put yourself in your other person's shoes and to look at the other person, you're always going to have some hiccups. Communication is going to be one of the key factors there, where you just have to be able to communicate what you want. And then if there's going to be non-negotiables, there's non-negotiables in there. But be reasonable too. We talked about, someone wanted sex 4 times a week. So that's every other day. Maybe the other person has a headache or things like that. Do they still say, okay, well, I'm going to make sure that you're taken care of? Again, it's different cultures, different beliefs, different traditions. The Japanese have a saying, or Japanese women have a saying, belly full, balls empty. So they make sure that their husband is taken care of in those regards, that when they go out, they're not really trying to do things with other women, right? So it's just different aspects, right? But then I think there's an issue with how many children they're having in Japan or something like that. If we look at the statistics for Japan and birth rates, they don't have a high birth rate. Is it because of modern mentality, or is it because families are staying together, right? And then, of course, if you know about people in Japan, they have a very long, healthy lifestyle. Do we need people to be promiscuous still? Go out and make sure that the populace and the demographic can remain there, remain in their culture by having babies, right? We need to continue that. But if we just rely on one woman to do that, it's a very modern way of thinking. Because if we look back at emperors and kings and queens and things like that, they had multiple children, multiple spouses and things like that for kings, because they wanted to sow their royal oats. So they would have a harem of women, where now they're like, I have 70 children versus I'm with one person. I have 1 or 2 children with them, and that's my family. That family dynamic has shifted. So the idea of relationships too have shifted. Just because family has shifted, and just because the relationship aspect has shifted in the family too, it doesn't mean that we can't do what's best for ourselves. Now, I say that, but then at the same time, what do you want to accomplish? Some people want to have a family, raise a family, be a dad, be a mom, and yet some people just want to be a sperm donor, an egg donor, surrogate mother, things like that. Where is the line? There is no line, right? So your relationship or how you build your family is up to you. If you want to start a marriage and end a marriage, that's up to you. If you want to save a marriage because you rushed into it, or maybe you find that you're not happy anymore, that's something that you have to look at too. And I talked about this on past episodes on how you have feminine energy and masculine energy, and you have alpha energy and beta energy, all that stuff. We can get into the nitty gritty of relationships. We have already in the past, and I encourage people to check out the past episodes of the podcast if you want to really get into that. We will probably talk about this concept on Mindset OD on the aspect of the hard truth aspect of it, because there is a very sincere aspect that happened today where we see that you're in a relationship, we see that you wanted to make it work, or you see that it might not be savable, right? The non-negotiables just cannot be met. Maybe you're just two totally different person. One person is not willing to change. Regardless of the situation, ask yourself the question first. Do you want to save your marriage? Is it yes? Then that's when you're going to need a coach. That's when you're going to need a guide, a counselor, someone who's going to be there to help you get through the hard patch right there, that crazy cycle. Sometimes it's going to be just a couple of adjustments. Sometimes it's going to be a 180 where it's just like, all right, I have to change everything that I'm doing just to make this work. And do you want to? Sometimes you might say, this is just too much work. It's easier to throw away something that's broken and buy something new than to fix something that's broken. That's the mindset that we are in today. Just because it's broken or becomes broken, it doesn't mean that we can't fix it. It doesn't mean that we can't put in some effort. And is it worth it to fix it? You might see that people drive around collectible cars, old cars that maybe 100 years old. Why are they driving around those cars when they could be driving the latest and greatest? They said this car is worth fixing. Sometimes a marriage can be worth fixing. Sometimes the marriage is not going to be salvageable. So depending on your situation, depending on your relationship, you're going to have a unique outcome. And I encourage you, if you're in a rock and a hard place, to get a coach. Get someone who's going to be there to support you, to guide you through the process. Because my marriage is very different than Jeanell's marriage. And just because we have a different marriage, it doesn't mean that my marriage is better than hers and hers is better than mine. We have different views, and it's okay to have different views. And that's why I said in the beginning of the episode, it is okay to have different beliefs when it comes to relationships. Whatever relationship you want, understand it. If you are in a relationship that you started, don't just jump ship and say, oh, I'm in a traditional relationship, and then you want to be in a modern all of a sudden. Understand your core values, your belief, right? Your foundation. What do you want that to be? Build your marriage on that, and then you're going to see that happiness can be there. But happiness doesn't come automatically. You have to know the person, you have to do the work, and you have to make the changes that need to be made. Marriage is not automatic. It's something that's going to be very pragmatic. Every day you're going to have to put in something, whether it be a little bit of you or a big part of you. Depends on the moment. Some days are going to be big parts. Do you have what it takes to stand the test of time? We all have what it takes to stand the test of the time. We just have to get that mindset. Is marriage temporary or is marriage permanent? It's all a mindset, and it depends on what you want too. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, you can email me coachinginsession@gmail.com, and I will see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone take care.